Every bit of additional warming adds greater risk for Africa. Worse drought, more heat waves, and more potential crop failures. But what can people do about it? Well, take a look at this edition of Eco Africa. I am Chris Lems, coming to you from Lagos, Nigeria.
And I am Sandra Kahumza Twinobdio, joining you from Kampala, here in Uganda. Not only is the planet heating up, wildlife species are on the verge of extinction. So how can we help them make a comeback? Learn more about it right here, coming up in today's show. How a wildlife academy in South Africa helps fight poaching. How giraffes in Kenya are being saved from extinction. And how a fashion library in Amsterdam is reducing clothing waste. But first, we head to my country right here in Uganda. Imagine riding around on a quiet, smoke-free motorcycle through the streets of our capital. That is not a dream. We're seeing more and more of those emission-free border borders cruising through Kampala. The next report, as you'll see, shows that African countries can take a real step towards e-mobility and much more.
Jocelyn Kimbabazi is the proud owner of a motorcycle. Not just any motorcycle, but a quiet electric one. She received a loan from an electric motorcycle company a year ago.
It was like an offer they gave me at no deposit. I didn't put any down payment. They just gave me, but I pay 5K every day.
That's about 32 euros per month. Jocelyn Kimbabazi's motorcycle taxi runs on solar-powered batteries, a real novelty in Uganda. The idea to sell e-motorcycles on a pay-as-you-go basis came from the startup Zembo. It imports inexpensive electric motorcycles from China. The company charges the batteries in its workshop. If all of Uganda's gasoline-powered motorcycles were replaced by electric ones, it would save about 100 million tons of CO2 every year. But there are still around 600,000 gasoline-powered motorcycles in the country. The startup Zembo says this can't be the future.
In Uganda, we're importing 12,000 petrol motorcycles every month to serve the market. And this should be electric, but to make it electric, we have to invest not only in purchasing the bikes, but also the battery and charging infrastructure.
The transition would cost millions of euros over several years. So far, the only government support for electric vehicles has been to suspend import duties on electric motorcycles. Even so, such electric motorcycles still cost about 1,300 euros, not cheap by local standards. But there are already more than 1,000 of the motorcycles in the capital, Kampala.
So the demand is there. Riders like the bikes, it saves them money. It costs less than a fuel bike to operate. We're just missing the money to invest, and it's difficult to raise as a startup in a relatively new business and a new model. Conventional financing for any startup is normally not an option.
At least they have support from international companies and organizations, especially from Europe and the United States. Financing green initiatives like this is important. Otherwise, poorer countries in Africa, in particular, would not be able to invest in electric vehicles and certainly not in renewables. This would also help them protect themselves from the effects of climate change. According to the African Development Bank, Uganda would need more than 27 billion euros by 2030. But so far, the country has received only 10% from the global north. The WWF in Uganda also complains of a lack of funds.
Unless we're able to attract additional investments, either from bilateral governments or private sector companies in the global west, will continue to crawl. And if we have to win this challenge of climate effects in our Mid-East, we need to be able to attract those kind of investments.
It was only at the latest climate summit that a fund was set up to compensate those countries particularly affected by climate change. Money is now being paid in so that regional banks in Africa can also support companies like electric motorcycle startup Zembo.
you can see that there's more funding that came through, especially for the African countries. And now, right now, Equity Bank has been accredited by the Green Climate Fund. So we're definitely going to be doing lots more things. So we'll just need to be bold enough and give ourselves a target and say we shall have maybe 30% of our book, all of it to be green.
Jocelyn Kembabazi is already driving green and does not regret her investment, even if it's still hard to find charging stations where she can exchange her empty battery for a full one.
There are places you go to and you check on your location, you cannot find a substation. Maybe you're far away in Mitiana, somewhere, Mitiana Road, but you cannot find a station. Even people be telling me, can you ride me up to the village? Can I ride this up to the village? But so far the stations are not yet extended there.
Although this causes her to miss out on a few journeys, it's still worth it, as it's cheaper for her to maintain the electric motorcycle than a gasoline-powered one. She expects to repay her loan within a year and a half, since she has no shortage of customers.
Most of my clients like it because most of them don't like noisy things. It's calm and it's so good. It moves gently, no pressure, no vibrations.
And it doesn't pollute the environment. Drivers and passengers may not always be aware of it, but the electric motorcycles are helping Kampala's urban climate.
What a great idea. Our next report takes us to Cambridge in the UK, where putting solar panels on a historic building is causing heated debate.
That's right, Sandra. There we have sunny optimism about renewable energy on the one side, with the other throwing shade on what could be bright prospects.
It looks like restoration work, but what's really happening here is a fundamental innovation atop old walls. The famous King's College Chapel in Cambridge is getting solar panels. The chapel is more than 500 years old. Much of the structure is still original, but the lighting is electric. Real candles are largely ornamental. The solar panels will soon supply the necessary electricity. For the chapel's dean, a long overdue solution.
And when you begin to think about the younger people, their future, you have to take the climate crisis really seriously. And so for me, it's a wonderful opportunity to marry these two things together. Backward-looking tradition and formality, and the future for human beings.
400 solar panels fit onto this old roof. It's perfectly angled to catch the sun's rays, but historians are sceptical.
In our view, to cover the roofs with solar panels, which are highly reflective, will introduce a very discordant element. And although they won't be highly visible, they will affect the way one appreciates the chapel. They'll appear in views of the roof, they'll appear in views of the skyline.
But supporters say the benefits outweigh these aesthetic concerns, as the panels will both power the chapel and cover 5% of the college's entire electricity requirements.
But the moment has come when the balance of priorities between aesthetic pleasure and sustainability and doing what we can to not only preserve the past but create a livable future.
A livable future is just what a fashion library in Amsterdam is trying to help create. The fashion business is one of the most polluting industries in the world. This next report takes us to the Netherlands to find out just how the rag trade can be more eco-friendly.
At this library, people borrow clothes, not crime novels. Welcome to Lena, Amsterdam's fashion library. It's the Dutch answer to textile waste and environmental pollution caused by the clothing industry.
My background is in vintage, so I've always been involved in recycling clothing through vintage stores. But nowadays it's challenging to find something you want. And even when you do, it often ends up as just another second-hand item in your closet. That's a shame, and that's where the idea originated, to share clothing with each other in what's basically a large shared wardrobe.
Hundreds of dresses, pants, and shirts are sorted according to label or style. The cost of borrowing them varies from 25 cents to several euros per day. Pieces can be purchased, too. Once borrowed items have been returned, they're washed before being returned to the racks. Just like with a regular library, users need to register first. The Fashion Library now boasts around 6,000 members.
It's very flexible and nice to pick out something new without having to buy it straight off. Sometimes you want to wear something extravagant, like the bright pink blazer I just tried on. You might not wear it often, just for a special occasion. It's fun.
Sowieso. Ja, het is gewoon heel fijn. Ja, tuurlijk.
It's just really nice. Yes, I think there should be more places like this. So much clothing is bought and not worn. It's a great way to wear new clothes without harming the planet.
Dus ja, zeker.
In this age of fast fashion, the UN says the average person buys 60% more items of clothing than they did 15 years ago, yet keeps them for just half as long. Every second, the equivalent of a truckload of clothing is burned or dumped in landfills around the globe. Many discarded textiles wind up in African countries where they land straight on the trash heap. Or they're sold as second-hand clothes, overwhelming local markets. The fashion industry has a huge environmental impact. It's responsible for around a quarter of water pollution worldwide. Back in Amsterdam, the Fashion Library now has its own online shop, as well as collection and drop-off points in other Dutch cities.
I strongly believe this is the future, and that it has to be, because we need to transition to other systems. We can't continue to consume and produce in the same way because resources are depleting. So we hope to inspire others, and that other clothing brands will adopt this approach.
Then fashionistas can not only look good, but feel good too, knowing their style is sustainable.
Coming back to Africa, a big problem that affects many countries here is poaching, the huge illegal and dangerous trade in wild animals. It's typically very difficult to bring poachers to justice because their crimes often have no witnesses. Key evidence is frequently destroyed unintentionally by first responders. A center in South Africa has made it its mission to turn the tide on wildlife crime.
This is an all too common sight on South Africa's reserves. A rhino killed by poachers is cut open to find the object that killed him. That's often the first clue to help catch the culprits. But this work requires a lot of know-how, and experts are in short supply. Greg Simpson is taking on the poachers butchering wildlife here. Since most of these crimes are never prosecuted, Simpson founded an academy that helps train rangers and other first responders to wildlife crime scenes about the importance and intricacies of criminal forensics.
We realized that a lot of the people that first came across these scenarios were not necessarily trained in handling a crime scene, and particularly a wildlife crime scene. And there's certain skills that are really valuable, and forensics is one of those skills. So we felt there was a great need, and that training rangers and people that are first responders or even professionals that come across scenarios where an animal is poached or there's another illegal activity, and if they have some forensic skills, then it means that that investigation is more likely to end up in a prosecution at court.
At this facility, the Wildlife Forensic Academy simulates different wildlife crime scenes based on real-world examples, including a snared giraffe, a killed lion, and a rhino poached for his horn. Students are trained in forensic techniques in order to preserve and collect vital evidence which can be used by the authorities to move forward with court cases.
In this environment, we can expose them to all these different scenarios so they can learn how to preserve and collect the forensic traces and document them correctly so that later down the line they end up with a successful prosecution in court. And that's what we've tried to create in this academy. Multiple scenarios, really drum in what they're meant to learn. And so when they go back into the real world, they're much better at tackling wildlife crime.
One major challenge when it comes to wildlife crimes is that they generally occur in remote places, making them difficult to prove. South Africa's vast scrubland offers cover to poachers who ambush their prey.
Our issue with wildlife crime is often there aren't any witnesses. There's no one else around. Maybe someone heard a gunshot, but that's all you have. But if you actually can link someone to a crime through something like a footprint or a cell phone or a weapon or DNA even, that is really powerful in court.
Rangers are often the ones who first discover the carcasses of poached animals. Their initial response is critical to reduce the risk of evidence being contaminated or destroyed by wind or rain before the authorities can arrive on the scene. Those details can make or break a case's chances in court.
I think it should be full hands-on ground field rangers as well, because they're often the ones who do come across the scenes before we do. So yes, I do think it's something valuable for all rangers throughout South Africa and throughout the African continent as well.
In addition to collecting proof, students at the academy also take part in mock trials, where they have to defend the evidence they've collected. The participants in this simulated court proceeding include former prosecutors, judges and law enforcement officials. Collecting evidence is only the first step in a long legal process. In real-world cases, ensuring what they've gathered can hold up in court is vital.
Training, which to first responders and those that need to understand their role, will definitely have an impact in fighting wildlife crime, in the sense that it will then lead to credible evidence which the prosecution can use in proving the elements of the offence against the perpetrators.
Poaching is a billion-dollar business. In Asia, 1 kilo of rhino horn sells for tens of thousands of US dollars. The financial incentive is huge. Rhinos, elephants, rare reptiles and succulent plants all pay the price for consumer trends. The loss of life has profound impacts on the environment.
These large megafauna, like elephants and hippos, they have a really important role to play in an ecosystem. As plant eaters, as large animals, they have an important role in shaping the environment and the habitat around them. They have a role in seed dispersal, nutrient cycling, and by removing these animals, it can lead to biodiversity loss and changes and transformations of whole landscapes. In addition, it can also lead to unintended impacts, for example, increasing human-wildlife conflicts and having further impacts onto other whole entire food chains and ecosystems.
In 2022, South Africa lost 448 rhino to poaching, but there were also over 130 arrests and a number of convictions, including one that resulted in the poachers being sentenced to 60 years in prison. As wildlife crimes continue, training in dealing with them will become increasingly important to ensure that the country's biodiversity is protected.
They are the world's tallest land-dwelling creatures, and I think they also look rather lovely, giraffes. Sadly, there are fewer and fewer of them because even giraffes are being poached in their droves for their meat or for their coats.
And there are more reasons for poaching increase. Now, some people believe in the healing powers of their organs. Let's take a look at a conservancy in Kenya that is especially dedicated to the protection of giraffes.
From the outside, this looks like a brutal capture. But these gamekeepers want to transport this giraffe to safer ground on the mainland. Rising water levels on Lake Baringo turned a section of the giraffe's conservation area into an island. So in 2021, the Ruko Wildlife Conservancy managed to relocate 7 stranded animals. All of them endangered Rothschild's giraffes, distinguishable by their white lower legs. It was over a decade ago that the Conservancy and the local community first joined forces to create a sanctuary for giraffes. But a few years ago, manager Rebi Sabay says it became clear that those stranded on the newly emerged island were suffering badly.
At the island, there were a lot of challenges. Number one, the giraffes had a constant attack by diseases. Second, there was less forage. Third, there was an attack by python that could strangle the young ones, and also the crocodile. So comparing the island and the mainland, we saw that the challenges are more in island than in mainland.
Rothschild's giraffes are mainly found in savannas, like here in the Baringo region. In Kenya and neighbouring Uganda, only about 1,400 can still be found today. Their numbers have been greatly reduced, mainly due to poaching. But with the involvement of the community, the situation is improving, helped by a 17 square kilometre giraffe sanctuary established within the Ruko Conservancy. The elegant animals are watched over by rangers and members of the Twiga Walinzi, or Giraffe Guard initiative. Robert Parillo is one of them. Having grown up here, he knows a lot about the giraffes.
When we were children, we were told that the Rothschild giraffe originated from Baringo and was called the Baringo giraffe. Its meat was said to be very sweet, and the bones contained a very special type of fat that people used for medicinal purposes.
Today, what matters most to him is that the animals can thrive and reproduce. The monitoring team regularly checks their numbers and looks out for injuries. At the moment, there are 14 Rothschild's giraffes in the Ruko area. The initiative not only benefits the giraffes, but also the people who live here, the Ilchamos and the Pokot. These pastoral communities have a long history of conflict over animals and grazing land.
There's been no peace around the Ruko area right now, until when the two elders from the two communities sat down. They said that we need to do a wildlife conservancy. We need to reintroduce Rothschild giraffe, famously known as a Baringo giraffe, as a symbol of unity, and start now a conservation so that it can bring the two communities together.
But to do this, they needed both land and giraffes, which had disappeared from Baringo. Each community contributed land, and the Conservancy brought in 8 Rothschild's giraffes from another nature reserve. Meanwhile, community members are also benefiting. 30 people have found jobs as rangers or giraffe guards, like Robert Parillo. The communities also receive a portion of the Conservancy's income, which they mainly use to pay children's school fees. The kids have also developed a respect for the animals.
I tell my parents that the giraffes are good because they help generate revenue from tourism, and they also fertilize the soil.
The project is supported by international NGOs and is now well accepted by both communities.
We can now talk about how to protect the animals, how we can develop guidelines to protect them and their pastures, and what we can do to create new employment opportunities, and what new things we can introduce so that we can continue to grow. So we have really benefited since bringing these animals here.
The giraffes have settled in well at the sanctuary. Their numbers have nearly doubled in the past decade, from 8 to 14. And there are more babies on the way. 2 of the females are pregnant.
Oh, that is good news. And with that, we need to leave you today. Thank you for watching. We hope this edition of Eco Africa gave you some fresh new ideas. I am Sandra Kahomza Twinodio, and bye-bye from Kampala, right here in Uganda.
Bye, Sandra. See you again next time. And to all our viewers, do you have any thoughts or ideas on how to create a better future? Write and share them with us. We always love hearing from you. Until then, please follow us on our social media accounts. I am Chris Alem saying so long from Lagos, Nigeria.